Thanks, brother. That helps me with my editing. But yeah, I think you're talking about something that Don Bennett talked a little about in my interview with him, and he was saying, you can definitely have foods that have some health benefits, but they their negative consequences outweigh the health benefits. Like I think garlic is an interesting example. Now I'll eat garlic. I'm not, I, but I recognize that it's not really a natural food. It's like if you were out in nature, it's very unlikely you'd be eating raw garlic, you know. So and perhaps like when you roast garlic or you cook it, it probably changes the chemical composition of it. I know that there's a toxic substance in garlic, but but I think Don Bennett has a great point. It's like there are foods like this, like garlic, where in certain circumstances the negatives outweigh the positives. So you can get the heart association saying include garlic in all your meals because there's some beneficial qualities, but they're not recognizing there might be detrimental qualities as well, you know?
Yeah, the interesting, I think about this as far as what I would eat naturally if I was running around in the jungle or the woods. And obviously, fruit is easy to understand that you would eat that. But then I think about, you know, why do plants create fruit? Like a lot of times they want things to eat the fruit and then go and defecate somewhere and spread the seed.
That's right.
And then I'm thinking, okay, so they want things to be tasty and colorful so that they get attracted, things get attracted to them. And it gets really scientific or Darwinism, in the sense that um, is it, you know, something might not taste good to us, like it might be bitter, like kale or something, but there could be things in there that scientifically like are good for you, but based on your tongue and your taste buds, you wouldn't really want to eat it. And that, there's an interesting thing because the plant is made up of chemicals and it has things that are beneficial. And because we're advanced, we can sort of look at these foods and determine, if there's anything good in there. But
You know what you're reminding me of? Something that Doug Graham said, that whenever he feels a craving for something salty, he'll eat some celery. And it may be that things like kale, they only taste good when our need for those minerals gets to a certain level. And so it may be that, I mean, I know there are some primates that have very high percentages of fruit intake in their diet and relatively low vegetable intake. And it may be that you're just going for those veggies when you really need those minerals. And then when you get enough, you go back to primarily fruits. And then after a while, you need the veggies again. And so if you have enough minerals, it may be that the vegetables don't taste that good, you know?
yeah, it could be, yeah. And then there's a phase where, like, when we cook things that, like, I think that, we probably did adjust to cooked foods
Yeah,
and even meat to some extent. I mean,
yeah,
um, I think if people probably had a small percentage of animal products with a 90%, plant-based diet, that they'd probably be like in Asia, if they have like a big thing of rice and veggies and maybe a little fish on top.
yeah.
It could be like, well, the fish is doing some harm, but it's not that much, or your body can deal with that small amount of that type of thing.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Will, and I think this is kind of why the paleo approach can kind of work if you compare it to SAD, you know.
Yeah,
Uh, but the problem with the paleo is many people extrapolate and then they use it to justify going to TGI Fridays and eating a plate full of wings. That is not that's not like what you're describing. You're describing a little bit of meat that is eaten in conjunction with a pretty heavy load of carbohydrates and lots of natural fruits and vegetables. So, yeah.
yeah. I had an interesting idea, and it might exist already, but there was a book called "What the World Eats," and it had pictures of families
Yeah.
in front of all this food for like a week, and there were some really beautiful families like in Africa and different areas, which was like grains and fruit
Yeah.
stuff. And I thought about a book that would be about going back to traditional diets for each culture.
Yeah.
Like Mexico is now like the fattest country above the US. And it's really sad. And I'm eating like rice and beans and like tacos, quesadillas, um, and there's people who have approached me from those cultures, and even like Asia, like there, there's issues with white rice because they think white is better than brown. So it's, it's like, well, brown is dirty or whatever. Like there's cultural beliefs,
Yeah.
but a lot of them aren't eating the foods that they used to eat. And it's like poverty, and when they get money, they want to start eating animal products and cheese, and it's kind of sad because like I'm going back to what the original people ate in different. Like I might eat some Indian food and eat some Mexican food, corn
Yeah.
corn
It's
as well.
it's really sad. It is really sad. And basically, the United States has exported nutritional ignorance throughout the world.
Yeah,
that's that's the crime. And these agrarian cultures who were subsisting primarily, Dr. McDougall refers to this a lot. They're subsisting on high carbohydrate, high vegetable fruit diets, and they're not having the kind of illness that we have. It's criminal. It's criminal. But it's cool that they're coming to you. It's cool that those folks are coming to you, and they're just people are not going to want to be sick anymore. They're going to reach a point where they're just not willing to be sick. It'll have to change, and I have hope. That places like McDonald's, hopefully, eventually, demand will shift what they produce.
yeah, and I find that it's really interesting, and I don't fully know all of the history, but I have a background in Ukraine and Poland, and
Yeah,
like pierogies and cabbage rolls and stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I always find it fascinating that people were able to invent and create things based on the food that they had in those areas. Like in Ukraine and in Poland and that, it's like root vegetables. So they take a cabbage and they wrap stuff, in it. Pierogies are like potato or potatoes wrapped with, in a flour
yeah,
shell. And then Mexican, there's in Mexico they have corn, so they made, bread and like tortillas, and they used rice and beans. So you take all these foods that are natural to your area, and you created these meals. So there's a real amazing connection to those foods and what they had available.
yeah. There's a beauty to that, and I think too, you could call it like a nutritional evolution or a dietary evolution dependent upon local ingredients, and they come up with these meals that are nutritionally balanced. Like the beans and the rice. There's a balance that comes from eating that combination. It's fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's your take on like local, speaking of like people using the food in their area, local food? Like I'm in an area that's, Canada, it's colder, and we have a lot of potatoes here. There's an island, Prince Edward Island, and they're like famous for the potatoes. And then we have potatoes here in New Brunswick. And if somebody were to ship bananas and from some of these tropical areas versus like buying local, what's your take on sort of choosing that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, it's. I think that the local idea is important. It's important and it's useful. And for somebody like you, in the summertime, it becomes more possible. But I think it's an unrealistic rule that you can't apply universally, like for someone like you who lives in the northern hemisphere. In California, it's easy for people to say eat locally because all year round, locally, they have access to fruits and vegetables. But it's kind of ignorant of other people that live in other climates, and not everyone's going to move to California or Thailand. So now, I think you can make the argument. I mean, you're raising an interesting point. I mean, is it better for you to eat local potatoes that you've put in your cold cellar, uh, or is it better for you to buy a case of bananas? That's that's a. I mean, I could see someone who wants to be totally raw ordering cases of bananas. I know a 40 Below Fruity She lives way up there in the north, and I think she's totally raw, and I respect that. And she's getting cases of bananas shipped up there. I mean, what else is she going to eat? She can't eat walrus blubber, you know. So I mean, what has she got locally? So I think this local argument, it's a bit heavily, it's been emphasized more than it deserves, because that local issue for anybody who has an extended winter, that what are they going to eat locally? You either have to have a cold storage for stuff that you grew in the summer, or you got to do canning, which a raw person would say, that's degrading the quality of the food if you do canning. Um, so it's an interesting argument. I mean, for somebody that's raw, I think it's justifiable to be ordering fruits and veggies from the tropics. For somebody who's a cooked vegan like yourself and has like their own farm, that's the ideal. And if you're in a cold climate and you don't mind doing a little canning, and you got a cold cellar, you can put carrots and potatoes down there. You can probably still eat a good bit of local food even in the winter, but you're probably going to have to supplement at least to some degree.
Yeah, we have potatoes pretty much all year round. I think they're in storage somewhere here because they're from New Brunswick and that.
Okay.
So in the grocery store, there's potatoes that are pretty much year round from this area somehow stored. And then, there's bananas and all sorts of things that come in from other places. But yeah, like I try not to, like there's a guy who was talking to me about bananas, and like you could start looking at how they're grown, like not just bananas, but any type of fruit and vegetable where you have to clear cut.
Yeah.
In some of these countries, then there's animal issues with
Yeah.
that. And even people, like what they make people do to pick things for chocolate, like cocoa or cacao, whatever.
Yeah, it's almost slavery. Yeah, yeah.
It's like I could see myself over time getting more and more aware and sort of making choices that are more enlightened over time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, some people have an easier time of getting those things. But like when I order things, I don't know exactly every single thing that's made and if there was any abuse of any kind going on. And,
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know, and I think in these times, it's probably virtually impossible to get something that's completely pure. Uh, but you make a great point, and I have seen, there's some pictures of like banana, I don't know if they're banana farms, and they do look a little strange. It's just like rows and rows of these banana trees, and it looks a little bit unnatural. And I'm sure I think there are. This is why a lot of raw folks they only eat organic bananas. I mean, I think there are some intense pollution issues associated with commercial banana production. Uh, but like you said, I mean, you might be buying locally. I don't think you don't strictly buy organic, right? So you buy potatoes. They might not be organic. I mean, the potatoes you're getting may be local, but they could be potatoes that are the consequence of a unethical production system. Uh, I think the ideal local situation is where you grow your own food. Now that's impractical for most of us, but I think then I would be solidly behind it. If you've got a little patch of land and you can grow a lot of your own stuff, then I think local's really key. Uh, but this is a modern society. We have modern technology. We have shipping. Uh, I think we also have to be realistic.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think local is necessarily the best if it depends on the practice that they're using, like you say, organic or not, or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
It's just overwhelming the amount of things that I get, asked about, or if I post anything, it can be criticized or discounted.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm trying to be open-minded as far as like whatever works for people. Like if somebody comes to me and they're like, this something isn't working, like they're gaining weight or whatever, I try to do some troubleshooting, but all I can do is tell what people, what worked for me, and um, it's going to evolve. Like I was eating certain things. I didn't eat oatmeal when I first did this in July.
Okay.
And then I used oatmeal cold, like raw. I didn't want to cook it because I didn't like warm oatmeal.
Oh yeah.
And somebody was saying, well, it's less calorie dense if you cook it because swells up with the water. And, I was resistant to that. But so then I started to cook it, and then I got off the caffeine, and then I'd have a few diet pops or I was completely, so, it's just an ongoing process.
Let me ask you something about that, Will. So before cooking the oatmeal, were you soaking the oatmeal in room temperature water?
No, I just pour it in a bowl and add the banana milk, and it would soak as I was eating it.
It's kind of like muesli kind of like.
I guess, yeah. I just didn't like a soft, mushy texture and especially warm. And
Okay, yeah.
so it was just from my upbringing of eating cold cereals that had a bit of a crunch to it.
Okay.
So I would put I'd put it'd be chewy. It wouldn't be soft.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, if you take a cup of rolled oats that are raw and then you like uncooked and then you add water, it's going to swell up, and that's a certain amount of calories. If you eat the 1 cup of uncooked oats as it is, it's the same amount of calories, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you cook it or not.
Right. Right.
In terms of, it might be easier to digest. If it's cooked, it might be broken down more. I
Well,
didn't
it's
really.
not it's not very pleasant eating dry oatmeal, right? It's not very enjoyable, is it?
Yeah, it was. I liked it, but with the banana milk and everything. But the idea of calorie density that Jeff Novick talks about is when you add water, if that means that you're going to eat less of it because it's increased in volume.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
so if something is dried out, it's going to be like something that's dried out. You can eat more of it, basically.
Right.
So
Okay.
so the benefit of calorie density only applies if you eat less of the overall food, because the fact that it's increased in volume, and that means that you don't eat as much.
That's interesting. I mean, raw fooders would say that one of the reasons you want to eat raw is because the natural constituent of a raw food is water, uh, and not only I think would they say that it has high water content, which is healthy, but some people say that the water in an organic food is different than water you drink out of the tap, because it's I think electrolyte wise, or I'm not exactly sure the details on it, but yeah,
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. You're saying it in terms of a weight loss interest.
just in terms of weight loss, like if something has less calorie density and it's got more water, then you're not going to eat as many calories of that food. But you interviewed that guy that was doing the fasting,
Yeah.
and he was talking about water can't be really absorbed very much at a time, and it's good to eat it to get the water in the food itself,
Right.
and it's your body won't really absorb very much. And that's how I feel a lot. Like I don't really pound down huge bottles of water, and I'm not super active and exercising, but if you think about it, like the oatmeal has 2 cups of water with a cup of oats, and the Dandy blend is say 2 cups in the morning.
Yeah.
That's separate from the food itself, but I don't. And then also because I'm off caffeine, I don't think I'm probably not having, like, it's a diuretic as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So so when I did the weight graph, it's like ups and downs, and I try to explain like here's where I started doing weights and I started drinking a little more water, and then here's where I went off coffee, because you might retain more water now because you're not peeing out as much with coffee, right?
That's right. That's right. And you know what else? I don't know if you've come across this, but there's a huge environmental impact from the growing of coffee. Coffee uses tremendous amounts of water for production, which
Yeah,
is
there's lots of indirect effects of all our choices. I mean, even from clothes and shirts, with
yeah.
with the labor, and it's just becoming more aware over time of the choices that we make. But yeah, I'm loving it.
Hey, let me ask you something, Will. You said you got your blood test, and I know that your wife has kind of done a lot of these changes with you. So has she gotten blood tests, and has she seen similar results?
Well, she's going to go next week and get hers tested. Um,
Have you interviewed her yet? You got to interview her for your Potato Strong channel.
yeah, I've had people, women especially, ask me to get her more involved, and she's doing an accounting degree or designation, and
Okay,
she'll be done at the end of June.
gotcha, gotcha.
So it's right now she's doing group work, and it's pretty stressful, but so
Okay,
I do try to get her involved. But the thing is, when you put yourself in social media, you need a certain thick skin, even if you're successful.
yeah,
'Cause
yeah,
everybody has an opinion about like every single thing you eat. You know, um,
yeah.
it's very there's a very actually Jeff Novick just posted something, and Happy Herbivore posted an article about perfectionism, and Jeff talked about purity sort of thing, nutritional elitism he called it.
Ah, I like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even we're quite critical. Like I'm saying, okay, no oil, no caffeine, um, various things about organic and that different factors. But at the same time, you know, I do try to keep people focused on the big picture, which is just eating whole foods like vegetables, fruit, legumes, and whole grains mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I do tend to be, I get a lot of it and I can be that way too. And I'm trying to watch myself as well because, you know, if somebody makes something and they use a bunch of nuts or they use,
Olive oil or
yeah,
yeah.
a little bit of oil or something, I see a recipe right away. I can get my back up and say, hey, you shouldn't be using oil. You shouldn't be using this and that. But
Will, you reminded me of a great analogy to this. Have you ever noticed if you're really in a hurry to get somewhere, you're in the car, you're really in a hurry, and it seems like everybody's driving so slow, you've got to get there and they're in your way. And then on another day, it's like it's your Sunday, you don't have anything to do, you're driving and you're just relaxing, enjoying the scenery, and somebody behind you's in a real hurry and they want to get around you and how frustrating it is that they're trying to push you to go faster, you know. So it's like some days we're in a rush and some days we want to relax. It's like we're all at these different stages of awareness in terms of nutritional, knowledge. But I think one thing that happens is you apply some of these principles and then you personally experience the benefits of it. And then when you personally see the results and then your results jibe with what you're seeing in some places, it's hard to I mean, you don't want it. You have to tell the truth. You have to tell people, this is what's happening for me. But I totally hear what you're saying. I think it's good to be compassionate, to be constructive, give people a little bit of leeway, but kind of generally guide them towards what you know is true.
yeah, like, so, you know, with Bonnie, I'm not sure if how far she'll get into this. Um, and I'd love to get her involved and do interviews. And it's just that she sees what I go through, like a fair amount of frustration. And it's also great, and I love it. I'm trying to focus on all the positive aspects.
Yeah.
But there's so many critiques that it can be frustrating. But I'll see what I can do. And
Well, if she's not into it, that's cool. But let me ask you this: have you noticed objectively? Have you noticed any changes in her as she's gone through this transition?
yeah, like for her, she was never like she was not really overweight, but just for her weight, she went about, what is it, 6, 8 pounds. And on her frame, like she said 118 to 110 right now.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and she's 5'4". So, I mean, 8 pounds on her but mostly in the midsection, like the lower midsection, women can sometimes get that as they age.
Yeah. Does she feel better?
She feels better. Yeah. She had allergies quite bad in the summer, and she's been finding, probably because of dairy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, she
That
used
was
to
that.
take a lot of antihistamines, but now she's had almost no issues.
That's great. That's great.
She's yeah. So it's great to have somebody that is doing what I'm doing. And the thing is, she's eating as much or more, than I am. It's amazing. So but I want to get her out there and show the women that, because if they look at me, they can discount and say, well, that's a guy and I'm not going to have that effect. But
Yeah.
I still think it's going to work for women just as much. But
Oh, hell yeah. Has she also increased her amount of exercise like you have? Or is
mm,
she too busy for that?
yeah,
Because
I don't
because
really
you're
see it increasing. Like I see what we're doing is you do it and then you stop doing it, sort of thing. It's not like I'm going crazy with exercise. I want to make sure people understand that 90+% of my results and hopefully theirs is based on diet. I think exercise is great to be fit and to, you know, help all these other things, your mood and circulation. You can definitely burn some calories and that'll help accelerate your results. But I think the majority of it's diet. But for her, she does some